Good Monday to you, everybody in COM 710. Welcome to week, boom, 12. How's everybody doing? All right, week 12. Excuse me. We only have really 3 more weeks of readings and discussion because, although it's a 16-week course, we always give that last week over to you for wrapping up your papers and getting everything done and getting all this stuff in. So hang in there. You're doing great. You're going to make it. And let's get things started right here. Some wonderful coffee in my I'd Hike That coffee mug. Let's see. There we go. From my wonderful wife for Christmas. Much better. There. Now I am here, your sufficiently caffeinated communication instructor, to talk about your questions and answers from last week, week 12. But before we do that, let's take a quick look at some things that are coming up. I have received all of your presentations now, your second class presentation. I'll be grading those and getting them back to you this week. There are a couple of you that had some technical difficulties with the upload. And I think as of today, March 27th, that Blackboard was down this morning, I think. All right, but I think everything's fine now, and I'll be turning those around to you. Also, thank you very much for those of you who attended the Writers' Workshop this last Saturday. I think when I was thinking back, and I'm sort of reflecting back on things that we covered, what it comes down to that is improving as writers. And by the way, as I said in the workshop, we must aim for improvement, sort of a continuous improvement, because that's our business. We're communicators, and that's what we do. We find ways to study how messages are transmitted and received, and the whys and the wherefores, and then, just as important, we find ways to communicate that, to say, okay, this is what we know, and this is how we know, and this is maybe what it means, and then we send that message out to the public. All right, that's our business. So we really, really need to concern ourselves with our, this is a word I like, modality, our modes of communication, spoken, written. Be aware of our gestures and our intonality when we speak, and likewise, how we sound. So it's important to continue to learn how to write. And I was thinking about it, in order to improve over the long arc. All right. And there were some of you that had to bail out early, so you didn't hear this because we continued the session. But if you did hear this, pardon me, because now you're hearing it again. There are 2 things that you should be doing on an ongoing basis. The first one is, of course, write in your journal, write papers, write, find a local newspaper or a magazine that you like and ask them if you can write for them. I mean, you don't have to write as a journalist, but write poetry, write stories, write about what you read. Okay. And then within that process, try hard, and this takes practice, to look at and see your writing as if it were somebody else's. See, because what happens is number one, we have these sort of emotional projection, attachment to what we put on words, because that's how we're experiencing it, the words in here. We have a feeling about it. We might have feelings tied up about ourselves concerning what we write, huh? And then secondly, we may have a very clear picture in our mind, in our own voice to ourselves as to what we wanted to say, but then we don't see how maybe the message got lost between here and here, that is when we type it out. That process of communicating within ourselves, about ourselves or about anything else, is called intrapersonal communication. With the camera is focusing in on that. Okay. Intrapersonal communication. And so it's hard to see the mistakes that we make. I have that struggle. I do that too. I am not a good editor of my own material if I don't get some distance from it. And the way I do that is I set it aside and then, just walk away from it and do something that completely takes my mind off of thinking about what it is I'm saying and what I'm writing. Because again, that's that oral voice, me saying in my head. And listening to the voice in my head makes it hard for me to see the voice that's on my paper. So try to get that distance between what you've written and who you are, what's going on in here. Because writing is hard, it doesn't come naturally to the brain. Writing is, in effect, the memorization of abstract shapes that form, the abstractions. We use them to designate concepts, often feelings. Like a concept, like a thing, cat, CAT. But there's nothing in the abstraction in the shape that's related to that. Let me see. I've got just something handy here. Let me get another book. Okay. So here's Aesop's Fables. Yeah, I just have my coffee cup on there, made a stain. Okay. Now Aesop is the person's name, but let's look at this word, fables. Fables, fables. All right. Let's just look at this first letter. All right, that shape could be like turn like that and still mean f. And how do you know? Well, you just have to memorize it. So writing is abstract, very contextual. And what do we mean by contextual? Meaning it means different things, different shapes mean different things at different places at different times to different people. And the only way to learn it is to memorize it. All right. So, for example, if you grew up in a culture, let me give you another example. If you grew up in a culture in which you were told that this shape signified the sound b, like bat or boy. All right. But this shape signified this, which is the same letter but in Greek. So this is B, beta. Okay. And then what about this shape? Ba. This shape signifies ba, which you would only know because that's the Arabic letter for that sound, which you would only know if you grew up in a place that had a Semitic language like Arabic. And if you don't grow up speaking Arabic, this means absolutely nothing to you. And it shouldn't mean anything to you because it has no cultural context. We don't use it. So the process of writing is the process of your brain memorizing all of these abstract shapes and then remembering what they stand in for, and then repeating it back on, spitting it out on the page. And that's hard. So the first thing that you can do to help over that long arc is to write. The second thing that you can do is to give yourself the opportunity to memorize, to see over and over and over and memorize the use of these shapes in an abstract way, and that is to read. So I want to encourage you, and this is what the part we covered in the extension of our time, and some of you had to leave. I understand that, so I'm just saying it here again. Read constantly. And here's also a tip. Okay, try to pick works. Read about things that you like, things that interest you. All right. So I read a lot about, what do I read a lot about? I read a lot about poetry. I read a lot about communication. I read a lot about interpersonal communication. I read a lot about wilderness and our encounters with the wilderness, because I spent a lot of time outside. So I might be reading something like learning to the lost art of reading nature signs. So how do you find your way around on a trail, which is of interest to me because I go out into deep wilderness areas where there aren't people and there aren't buildings and there you don't have a car and you're on your feet on your foot, your best foot, and it's in your best interest to be able to understand the weather, or my best interest, as the case may be, to understand the weather, the animal tracks, where's the trail, all these sorts of things. That's what interests me. You find what interests you and read within that area. But secondly, okay, so in addition to finding something that interests you, volume, read something, some amount every single day. And I'm not talking about recipe boxes or emails. I'm talking about stuff in which you're internalizing the ideas. This stuff we sort of we process on the upper level of consciousness, um, but in which you're internalizing the idea and you're thinking about it. Right? Read that kind of stuff every day, and then third, pick a source. You know, whoever wrote it. First of all, that's written well, but then secondly, that especially if let me just interrupt myself on point number three. If you're writing, if you're getting feedback that's like, yeah, this could be stronger, this could be better. All right, pick something that about 2 to 3 words a page. You don't know what those words are, and you have to look them up. And get yourself a small dictionary and look them up. Right? There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Let me give you an example. All right. So, I when it comes to stuff that words I may not understand, and to continue to expand my brain's ability to read and write, I read foreign languages. Now, you do not have to read, you don't have to learn a foreign language, okay, to do this. You just read something that is challenging for you, and you have to look up a vocabulary word. So here is my copy, or a copy, of the New Testament in Latin, Novum Testamentum Latina. Okay, and when I purchase a book, I always I date it and then place it. That is where I was when I bought it and what date. And I look at this and it's like, yowie zowies, I bought this. Look right here. I was living in Lawrence, Kansas, doing a doctorate degree in 1991. Ouch. All right. So when I started reading it and pushing myself to learn the second language, I didn't know all the words. All right. And that's okay. So look at this. Look what I did. I'm taking notes. So I can get that to focus. You get the point. So, here are like all the little numbers, and down here are the definitions of the word. Okay. I like to write in my books. Maybe you don't. Okay. So about every page, 2 to 3, maybe 3 to 4 words that you don't understand and you need to look up, or you're not sure about. If you don't get a crystal clear definition of this thing, look it up. And even reading in English, there are still some words that I look up for. There's some words for just some reason. Like the operational definition, like eschatology. It's like, okay, I know what that means, but I can't, like, okay, what does it mean in the context of this sentence? So I look it up. That's okay. Get a pocket little small dictionary and look it up. That's the second thing to do. The first one is write a lot. Okay. The second one is read a lot, read things that challenge you, that expand your brain's capacity to understand these abstractions and in new ways, and write it out. And then the third thing is read actual print, like a real book. Now, why is that? Interesting question. There is a lot of research. Now, this comes from our field of communication, that points to how our brains process things differently depending on whether we're holding them in our hand or if they're on a screen. There's a different mental processing that goes when you're holding a book in your hand. That's the first reason. It tends to lend itself towards deeper thought and more patience in struggling through ideas, and as a consequence, it results in deeper comprehension. The second reason is that many online things have links in them, whether the text is linked or there's, go see this, and there's a link at the bottom, or here, look at this here. That temptation, that tendency to link, click beyond what you're reading shortens your attention span and reduces your ability to figure out number one, words that you don't understand, but number two, the concept being covered in what you're reading. All right. And that works against you as a writer. It's important for your brain to understand the connection between the abstract and the context. What is this letter shape that's B? What is it being used for? All right. When you see BACK, back. All right. Well, what is that contextually? Is that like, does that mean back as in the back? Or does that mean back as in indication of motion, like back up? Or does it mean, the colloquial, I will be right back, meaning a return? Three very different things, but you don't know. All right. So that's a very simple example. I'm not saying anybody doesn't know what the word back means. Okay. But your ability to concentrate and stay focused when you're trying to sort out the contextual meaning of words, the longer you can do that, the longer you can sustain that level of concentration, the better off you are when it comes to reproducing it, that is, writing. And beware, be careful of writing softwares, like Microsoft Word and Google Docs. Great. We all type everything. We don't write things longhand. Fantastic. But being able to type things, while it speeds up the process, it also speeds up the rate at which you can make mistakes. And so, the more you do something, the more you get writing, you practice, the better at it you get. The more you do something, make mistakes, the better at it you get. And that, again, you don't want that. Okay. All right. So if you have any other questions about your writing in general or about the semester paper, send them to me by way of email. And then, I'm in my office Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday from noon to 2 Eastern Daylight Time. All right. Now, between now and the end of the semester, keep working on your papers. All right. That's what you want to do. All right. Because we don't have an exam in this class. Okay. All right, everybody. Whack. Let's take a look at the questions back from week 11. Now, these questions, Vernon's dissertation, Vernon's book, is very small. It's thin. Okay. And I think it's written in a way that is straightforward. There's not a lot of jargon in there. It's pretty cut and dry as to here's what it is. Okay. So what I'm asking you to do, instead of trying to pull, more and more information, like, where's Tanzania and stuff like that. All right. I'm asking you to look at this work and to be critical of the work, which is something you should adopt as a habit. When you find a source, be critical of the source, be critical of who, I don't mean critical as in, but examine their methodology, examine their literature review, examine the data that they present, examine the conclusions that they draw from the data, and make a judgment call that their methods were solid. Their methods were the right methods to get at the questions or hypotheses that they put forward. The data that they pulled out was sufficient to answer those questions, and then the way they interpreted the data was appropriate to answer those questions. They're not making any leaps. It's a rarity, including us, to find an author that goes, oh yeah, you know what? I'm gonna propose a topic and write and research, and then when I get to the end of it, I'll say I completely failed. No, that's not going to happen. It doesn't happen often. All right. So it's up to you. This, again, is part of our business as communicators. It's up to you, scholars, to be able to develop the skill sets and the habit of looking critically at what they do. So that's what the 4 questions from last week were all about. Let's take a look. Question number 1, summarize chapter 2 in Vernon. Given the scope and the nature of Vernon's study, do you believe that she adequately covered the needed topics? Okay, Marquette, you went first. I'll take you first. Chapter 2 of Vernon's text focuses on religious politics, language, and culture. In the chapter, the researchers focused on the Pew Research Center, and their analysis of how, I think you have analyzation, I think you mean analysis, of how Sub-Saharan Africans view the role of religion in their lives and society. Conduct this research, they utilize surveys that were dispersed to each community in more than 60 languages. Out of those results, they found 2/3 of the population that took the survey were Christian and 1/3 Muslim. Previous research also brought claims neither Christianity nor Islam was growing and expanding more than the other. Okay. The text continued to explain how Christianity and Islam have coexisted in Tanzania for many years, et cetera, and you conclude, I found this chapter to be very enlightening and empowering, which I found interesting. What do you mean by empowering? And how are you empowered by the analysis of Pew data from Tanzania? Unless you're Tanzanian, I didn't know that. But anyhow, send me an email. Tell me, how is this empowering? That struck me. Okay. Vernon, in my opinion, has successfully answered her research questions that she set out to. Okay. Now, okay, yeah, and most of you, in fact, I think all of you said, yeah, okay, she really nailed this. Okay. There were a couple of exceptions. Excuse me, Olivia. You give kind of a summation of what she does in this chapter, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the topics, and then you write the topics may be relevant, but there does not appear to be a connecting thread between the topics. Each is standalone without logical transition to the next. Such would be required in order to follow her reasoning. Such meaning you needed transitions, or why are we switching from one to another? And I think that's a fair observation. Now, remember when you write, we said this on Saturday, think of your writing as patches in a quilt. Although they can look different, there needs to be something that stitches them together. There needs to be, whether you're talking about an entire area that you cover, say, and you list 8 of them here, Olivia, say religion in public life in East Central Africa, religion and development in East Central Africa, and so on. Okay. So then when you move from one, say religion in public life, to the other, religion and development in East Central Africa, you should say, you need something, if it's a concluding paragraph that says, okay, and now, and the standard cliches, and now we're going to switch gears and take a look at religion and development. You have to, okay, that's a little tired by way of writing convention, but if that's what you got, great. All right. But yes, you need something to stitch this stuff together. Okay. All right. Fair enough. On both accounts. All right. Question number 2. After reading Vernice chapter 2, what grade would you assign to this section of your work on a scale of her work on a scale of A to D minus? Briefly justify your grade. Brenda. As mentioned, I did not understand why Vernon decided to have this as a separate chapter from the literature review. Now, see, right there, Brenda, that's exactly what I want you doing. I want you saying, okay, why did you organize it in this way? And by the way, if you can't, if it's not clear as to why the author organized the material in the way, in this case, that she did, it may not be you. It may be that this is not great organization. Good. Be critical of the texts. The information in this section is good and important. The only section that I did not fully understand its relevance based on the text provided in the language and culture in Tanzania. I expected Vernon to delve into the main languages in Tanzania and traditional cultures of different Tanzanian tribes and how these intersect with mainstream religion, which is an excellent point. Because if you're doing a study, which you take a look, at how some entity, I don't mean like outfit, but the Adventist World Church is setting up a radio station, which radio waves, they don't pay any attention to fences or neighborhoods. They just blast out all over the place. So you're going to be crossing these linguistic lines and these cultural lines. There ought to be a discussion. That's a very, very good point. Vernon discusses a Swahili play and the analysis of the play by Krishir. She does not explain the relevance of this play, why she chose to analyze this play. Excellent point. In providing information about culture. For this reason, I would give Vernon a B. I think it's a very generous grade based on the observations that you make. Now, when you make these observations of someone else's writing, see, this is going to take us back to what we were saying in the beginning. Try to get some distance. Set your stuff aside. Switch the topic of your mind, and then look at your writing, reread your writing as if it were somebody else's. And if you find these sorts of things, like, why is this here and how does this connect in your stuff? Now, you got to fix it. Because if you can see it, I'm going to absolutely guarantee that somebody else who's not you will see it. Okay? Mimi, let's see what you had to say. After reading Vernon's chapter 2, I would assign this section an A. On the scale, my reason is as follows. In my opinion, Vernon dives deep into every subsection of chapter 2. For example, Vernon gives the readers a clear picture of how Christianity and Islam coexisted for many years. Vernon suggests Tanzania's first president, Nyerere, um, and handed over power in 85 to Muslim leader. 10 years later, that leader handed over to a Christian leader, et cetera, et cetera. So this is an example of coexistence. Yeah. And by the way, Nyerere, he was a communist. I mean, he was a Maoist. He was neither Christian nor Muslim. And that, I mean, I can tell you President Julius, um, that was a difficult time for Tanzania. Not the most productive time in terms of where they were in standing in East Africa. Check into the history. It's an interesting one. Okay. Additionally, Vernon suggests the government has also welcomed the education and health services provided by religious bodies. These not only reduce costs of the government, but also reflect philosophy that originally is concerned with the body and the soul. Okay, great. Great analogies. Great analogy, both of you. Good analysis of the text. All right, question number 3. Consider Vernon's literature review. Briefly summarize the subject areas that she covers. In your professional opinion, does she hit, does she touch on, whatever word you like, all the needed subject areas needed for a study? That's an awkward sentence. I admit, reading my own writing. Okay, Nicole. Vernon essentially covers many topics in her literature review. She delves deep, slight typo there, deeply into the origins and history of religious and other typo there. Be careful, even when you're writing these answers, use, and I'm not picking on you, Nicole, for everybody, use, a writing software, Smoke or Grammarly or something that runs in the background, and buy the paid, get the paid version. Don't go for the freebie. Right? These are like a couple of bucks a month. All right, because remember, in typing, you're speeding up not only your writing, but you're speeding up your rate of making mistakes. All right, and it gets hard to see them all. Believe you me. All right, let's go back to Unicole. Including its use in entertainment, education, various types of programming, including politically oriented religious programming. Additionally, Vernon reviews various theories of religion, including fundamentalist, Marxist, and phenomenological. I would like to have seen a bit more information on these theories. Yeah, okay, that's fair, Nicole. Okay, good answer, good analysis, good critical analysis of the texts, the sections of the text. Okay, question number 4. Now that you've summarized Vernon's literature review, list at least 3 other subject areas she might have covered. So, yeah. Now, when you're writing your own literature review, I mean, there's just so much space and there's just so much time, and you get to make the decision as to what gets put in and what gets left out. Now, if it's something that is important, really important, but it's not the focus of your study, you don't have the room to cover it, it's okay to tell the reader that. So, I recognize that this is an important area. We're just going to touch on it briefly, but not extensively, because that's not the focus of this research. It may play a factor here, but that's not what we're focusing on. That's fine. You just give your reasons for why you're doing what you do. Derek, what'd you have to say here? As mentioned in the previous post, I believe Vernon provides a thorough review of literature. Here are 3 other topics she could have covered. Number 1, as Vernon notes, the intersecting fields of topics of her literature provide a rich backdrop by bringing together religion, mass communication, and media study. Is this the first time this study has been done? Well, good question. This is the first time a study has been done for radio. Is this the first time a study has been done for Tanzania? It's a beautiful intersection, but what does it matter? Good point. Okay. Who else has said something about this? Why are you mentioning it? If you do, okay. Who has done what already? Good point. Number 2, what is the quality of the previous research into the subject area? So you're sort of overlapping, which is okay, which is fine. Yeah, or is there research in this area? Number 3, unless Rambo alone was the theoretical framework for her study, it would be helpful to have more scholarly work reviewed related to the process of religious conversion. A true theoretical framework would have reviewed more scholarly work on religious conversion, which is extremely important because that's the centrality of what she's looking at. That is when Adventist World Radio goes on the air, because their intent is certainly to make converts. Should she have delved into religious conversion and how has that been attempted in Tanzania? How has it gone? What has it resulted in? What sort of disruptions to the cause in society or not, etc., etc. Good points. Okay. All right, everybody. Remember, be critical of what you read, and that doesn't mean like, but ask questions. Ask questions. I mean, first of all, it's our job as communication scholars. But secondly, if nothing else, if you use a source that's just baloney, that's a bad source, you're on the hook. All right, now as the writer, and I do check your sources when I read your stuff. Actually, I check them a lot, and fortunately, I've been in this business long enough that I know many of the standard sources. I don't know all of the topics and fields that you do. And that's actually one of the things I like about reading your papers is I learn new things. I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't know that. Okay. But I've been around the business long enough that almost instantaneously I can get a sense that this is a solid source or not. Or in some instances, if I can't get that sense, depending on how you're using it, it sort of confuses me. I'm going, what are they doing here? And then I look it up. All right. So yeah, don't use flim flam, because as the writer, that's you. Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you so very much for all your hard work, showing up on a Saturday, working on those papers. I really appreciate it. You know that I think about you. I pray about you, especially those of you who are having some difficulty. You know who you are, or you're going through a period of discernment. You know who you are. And I assure you that you are in my prayers. All right, everybody, have a great week, and I will see you on Blackboard. Bye-bye.